This is what woke you up. I'm James Bennett. Thanks for watching. Well, today I have a return guest that is, I believe, at this time, really doing a lot for humanity with his work. He is Andy Porter, the psychic surgeon from UK, and yeah, I took his course, which is Master Protection and Meditation. I believe that's the name of the course that you just certified me in, right?
Yes, yeah, it was good. Enjoyed it.
Yes, I did too. Very, very interesting. And, very timely right now because as we've discussed, the spiritual warfare that we're in seems to be intensifying. It's more important than ever to keep our frequency high and keep our etheric field intact because it seems like the dark entities are very much opportunists, huh?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, this is what we see. Obviously, it's what I do every day as a kind of full-time profession, really. So, I think the way that I kind of see the work that I do now is, we're kind of in the trenches, nose to nose with these dark entities, basically on a kind of daily basis. So, they are quite masterful at the way they try to sort of circumnavigate around, protection, people's protection, and the kind of experiences that people have. But I think it's good, James. People like yourself, really, obviously myself and the guys that I work with, the teams that we work with, are starting to kind of surface the conversation so that people start to understand, when their life goes into some chaotic state, it could be a spiritual problem as opposed to just pure coincidence.
Yes. Well, we have as I've discussed on my little podcast, we have a very literal brand of brainwashing that's gone on, and we've all been brainwashed and MK Ultra'd, to one extent or another. And it's very interesting when you introduce information that is outside somebody's belief set. I mean, you can get visceral, physical reaction from them as you ask them to relinquish their belief set about something. It's like the old adage: it's easier to deceive than to convince somebody they've uh, they've been deceived. But I believe, as I've discussed, that the spectrum of injury and casualties of this brand of warfare that we've been subjected to is very, very wide. It's a very unusual brand of warfare. But when I talk to other people that are awake, I mean, a common vein seems to be the frustration with trying to convey truth or expand the consciousness to other people and still try to keep our frequency as high and our field as intact and sovereign as possible.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's quite a good way to frame it, really. I mean, that's again, this is obviously what we talk about all of the time. That's what we see, really, is that people are there is, I believe, there is a spiritual war happening. We see physical wars, obviously through our media, that type of thing, but I believe there has been a spiritual war going on, for probably eons on this planet, really. And really, the dark side is, has been, I would say, kind of winning that war, really, because sort of, the negative aspect is very clever at kind of manipulating human conscious awareness and human consciousness. And, I think if you look back in time, you look back to all of the different kind of generations of people that have controlled most people on the planet, through religions and other things, is that kind of concept. The Romans used to say, I think, didn't
oh, you just
they,
froze
very
up,
focused
Andy.
on, sports and things. And I
Yes.
think it did stop there for a second.
Yeah, it froze up for a second. Uh, well, do you get a sense that, if for no other reason, do you get a sense that we're winning the spiritual war? Because it seems that the dark feels a sense of urgency and more threatened than ever, huh?
My opinion is we're not winning. My opinion is we're making huge progress, really. So I think this is what I kind of dedicate my life to do now, really. I see myself here as a kind of, like yourself, just someone that's doing their part really in this kind of spiritual war. But the kind of tangible benefit from my perspective is we're working hand in hand with unseen entities, that are our spirit guides and spiritual teams and the angelic realms and that kind of stuff. So we're working with a lot of unseen energy. And I think that's what's starting to change the game. And I think because the frequency of the planet is starting to rise, because of all the things that all the spiritual people are doing and other people and general consciousness is starting to change, I think the dark side is concerned, which is when we see them go into this kind of, or create these big events that people focus on and everyone moves back into a fearful state. Because my belief is if we were all vibrating at high frequency, the dark aspect wouldn't be able to be here at all because the vibration of the planet would be too high, obviously. And of course, their role and job is to keep us in fear of everything and keep that vibration as low as possible. And that then kind of allows them to assimilate that energy into themselves. And that's how they sustain themselves by being here, really. So I think it is a kind of this ascension concept is all about frequency, in my belief, really.
Everything is, yes. Do you, what could you still, question that popped in my head, could you speak to what it's like when you confront a dark entity in somebody? Are they confrontational with you, or do they know that you represent the light and they want to flee, even if it's temporarily, they want to flee right away? What could you speak to that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if I kind of rewind a bit, really, so I've been doing this now probably 20 years or something. So 20 years ago, when I first started to do this, I found working against dark things quite frightening and quite difficult because they attack you, obviously. And when you have spiritual attacks, it's not like a physical attack. If someone is attacking you physically, you can defend yourself. But if you have a spiritual entity attacking you in a psychic way with psychic methods, if you like, unless you understand the kind of spiritual realms and how to deal with things from an occult perspective, you don't have any defenses at all. So literally, they can come into your space, they can kind of manipulate your dream state, keep you in fear, take you into sleep paralysis, attack you whilst you sleep, attack all of your family and people around you. So they are very, very good at what they do until you know what you're doing. And the moment you actually understand the rules of engagement and the fact that you can learn to protect yourself and move yourself into a very kind of protected, high vibratory state, then of course everything changes. So I used to talk to demonic entities 20 years ago that were in someone come into the room that I worked in, had a small shed in the garden I used to work from, and I'd kind of put my hands on somebody and an entity would start talking through them effectively, and they'd sort of spit at me and do stuff like that. But they would be very abusive, and all sorts of swear words and stuff. And effectively, it kind of felt like a fight, really, but a kind of spiritual fight. And I didn't really feel particularly comfortable or confident then. But of course, now when we clear clients now, the game has changed because obviously now I'm working with my guide Chen, and he's built a huge big team in spirit of spiritual entities, lots of which are not human and have never been human, coming from different races of different species of entity. So when we turn up now to work on a client, they disappear very quick because they realize one demonic entity against a big team of high vibrating light entities is not a match. So generally, and quite a lot of clients say to us actually, once they've booked a clearing appointment, they feel better the next day because the entities have already left, because they know the appointment's coming round and therefore this spiritual team's going to come in to perform a clearing and they've already gone basically. And we hear that all the time that they're hearing voices, they're suicidal, they've got all of the negative associations with that type of spiritual possession. But before the appointment happens, they're already resolved, really, and we just kind of tidy up. So the game's kind of changed from that perspective, I think.
Does Chen refer how does Chen refer to his collective galactic alliance, or is there a term that he likes to use?
He doesn't really kind of go down that line, really. So he doesn't really call them anything. He calls them his team, basically. And I think so. A lot of it with Chen, from my perspective, because I've obviously pushed him a lot over the years, 15, 20 years worth. So I pushed him a lot on who he really is, because obviously he reports to be this kind of very humble, kind of Chinese gentleman, effectively. And that's the imagery that he's always showed me. It's never ever changed. And I always see the same pictures in my mind and that kind of stuff. So he showed himself in a life that he had as a kind of humble Chinese farmer, really, I guess. But what obviously happens now is it's very clear that, there is a very big energy behind that and a very powerful energy. And he's actually built this collective team of other entities and other species with him, but he doesn't really call them anything. He just says myself and my team. So there is no, and I think the reason he does that is he doesn't want people to connect to something. When we talk about, we think about certain kind of the collective groups, and they become the Council of Nine or Council of 12, and there's all these different kind of spiritual groups that we hear about quite often on podcasts, but we never really know who they are. We don't really know what the agenda is that they work with. We don't kind of know what they're doing particularly, but people talk about them as though they're really good. So he doesn't do that. He just says it's Chen and his team that turn up effectively,
But it's
and I think so. It's kind of a more of a humble perspective, I guess.
well, it's obvious that they're of benevolent intention, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen miraculous things really happen over 20 years that, I mean, to me, it's just my normal job. I just, every day I wake up and do this work. So for me, it's so normal. But I kind of forget sometimes that for other people, what they actually perceive to happen when they have a clearing,
Yeah.
they will actually talk about things being pulled out of them etherically. So they'll feel things coming out of their stomachs or out of the back of their neck quite often, and things that are clamped onto their head. They actually feel them come
Oop, our connection got funny.
happens, and control devices and implants,
Uh-huh.
in people's field. And of course, people have a tangible feeling when those things are cleared.
Hmm. As you know, it's very interesting that when the soul leaves the body, we weigh about a half a pound less, huh?
Is that right?
So if one bloke asks another, what are you worth, mate? Well, I'm worth about half a pound.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? But then, of course, everything is energy, isn't it? So if energy leaves the physical body, in theory, there would be some type of tangible difference in the physical weight, really.
Yes. Well, as I've just merely dipped my toes into your world, with the benefit of being certified in your course, which has really enriched my life, I haven't had my guide show up. I've called him. It's hard for me to, I can't even hardly get my dogs to show up, really, Andy. So I got some work to do. Um, but I know for sure, effectively been part of a few different exorcisms. And uh, it was amazing when I spoke in divine terms on one or two of the occasions that the entity, I mean, it was like pouring gasoline on a fire, which very much lends legitimacy to the polarity, the divine, the light versus the dark. Huh?
Yeah, I think this is the thing, isn't it? I've worked with lots of people in all sorts of different ways, but there was one guy that I used to work with. He lived quite locally to me actually, and he'd been sort of practitioner of Satanism for quite a long time. So he'd been working with demonic entities, and he was part of a group, and they used to call these entities in, and they would actually get them physically to come into the space. So they would draw a pentagram on the floor and do the whole candles thing, and obviously summon a demonic entity, and that entity would actually visibly appear in this kind of protected thing that they would work with. And he'd done that for quite a long time. He's a very clever guy. And then, of course, at some point, he decided that he wanted to kind of mend his ways, I guess, as he became older. So when I knew him, he was probably 70 or something, and he booked clearings and he wanted me to go and clear him and that kind of thing. And, I kind of started to realize that is the case, really, that these entities obviously, they can manifest inside the physical space, but they tend to stay hidden if they can in that kind of etheric space or etheric realm, effectively.
Not my kind
But
of party. Not my kind of
yeah,
party. I might drink a couple of spirits, but otherwise, not my.
yeah. I mean, like you said, coming back to your first question, really, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of these entities, through people, and generally they're okay. They're actually quite nice, really, in a way. They talk to you, intelligently. You can tell you're talking to a very intelligent entity, and you know that very quickly they tend to have the upper hand because, of course, they've got access to know everything about us. So they can almost like pull your kind of record, I guess, and they know what you're frightened of and what you've been through and traumas and abuse and stuff that might have happened in your life. They have access to all of that type of stuff. It's all in your field effectively, and they can just open it like a book. And when you get talking to them, generally they're actually kind of okay. And when I first started to do what we kind of term sort of spiritual clearing, which is sort of exorcism in that way, quite often, Chen would be talking to an entity and they'd be laughing about the last time they saw each other thousands of years ago, and all sorts. So it's it's kind of a game for them, really. If they can maintain control of someone and use them for what they want to use them for, then that's what they do. And then at some point, if that game is up and there's a spiritual light working team coming in to clear that person, then quite often they just put their hands up, they laugh, and they just disappear.
A couple of gifted individuals, shaman and people I've known over the years have spoke with Draco. And when they speak about their parasitic uh, uh, relationship with us, they're very matter of fact. They say, will partake in a cow, its milk and its meat?" And it is as though we are livestock there for them, huh?
And that, yeah, I've had the same conversations, and that's exactly what they say. They
Yeah.
say, that they never normally um, take over someone. That person always uses their free will and gives away their power to these entities, basically. So whether that's in a substance abuse type state or hallucinogenic state or something, but normally in some type of altered state, these entities connect to us and then we give them permission to kind of be with us, really. And then, of course, they have our free will. So effectively, they can then assimilate our energy, our life force. They can move us into a very chaotic, negative life and, create all sorts of problems and intrusive thoughts, that type of stuff. But, they always say, but you did give permission for that. Every time we talk to an entity that's with a client, they always come back with, yeah, but this client gave away their power. They gave away their permission, effectively.
Yes, but there's so many different ways that we can allow the access. It seems like some are of our doing and some aren't. I mean, you can get put to sleep to have your tonsils removed and have your field violated. Uh, what would you say about? And then, of course, there's drugs and alcohol and drama and trauma. And, as I've discussed, if you want to take over an individual or take over an entire country, it's about fracturing the foundation, right? So it seems that there's some ways, in order to learn more, I was going to take a little exception with what you said, that it's always, boy, I could frame that. You let us in. But aren't there some circumstances in which our we allow the entities in without our consent?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the way that Chen used to show me that type of thing, that type of intrusion, is if our etheric field becomes perforated to the point. So if you can imagine we're inside this kind of bubble, really, and we walk around with this big bubble, if we do certain things, like you said, anesthetics, drugs, both recreational and medical drugs, they can actually perforate our etheric field. So we end up with holes in our field. And when we've got holes in our field, they're opportunistic hooks that these entities can come into, and they can connect to energy, and they can obviously siphon the energy, and then they can start to basically extract sort of life force and then control ultimately. So I don't think when I say always, it's not always, as you said,
Right.
it's there are other things, but I think it's all about the etheric field. If we're not protected, if we're not in a little bubble of protection, then we are a target basically. And of course, depending how high our frequency is, depends what and who can connect and how they do that.
Well, perhaps one of the most important parts of our conversation today is how important it is for us and to the dark ones, the sanctity of self, the sovereignty of our spirit. And the dark one's whole jam is getting us to leave self. And somebody wiser than me might say that self and God are are one and the same, huh?
Yeah, I agree, really. I think this, I mean, we obviously teach sovereignty on these training courses, as you know, and sovereignty is what I check every day, multiple times that I'm sovereign continually. So I need to know that my own energy is my own. There is nothing else in my field that shouldn't be there that has a low negative vibration. So that you could call it God, we can call it the light. There's different kind of terminology, I guess, that people can use. But effectively, if we're a sovereign individual, then we actually own our own self, our own energy, and that is our protection. And the moment we lose sovereignty, then we obviously that is a big downhill path that these negative entities can explore.
A havingness with self. And people that are taken over, as I've heard you discuss, I just heard last week's podcast on YouTube, and I'd thank you very much to tell us at the end of this where people can find your work, both on your wonderful website and on YouTube. But yeah, it was discussed that we can we lose our self through many different means. It's like we got distracted and left our cabin in the woods and left the door open or the window open, right?
I think that's the thing. And I think the kind of, in my opinion, like the schooling system is designed to do that really. So if you imagine if we were teaching our children about spiritual protection and sovereignty, sovereignty of self, individuals from a very young age, we would grow up knowing or certainly understanding how important it is to maintain that self-sovereignty. But of course, we don't get taught those things at all. We get taught to follow rules and orders, even if they're wrong. And again, that kind of works against our own truth and integrity. So, we look at people that are basically following rules that don't intellectually think about the rule that they're following. They just do what they're told because they've been programmed over many years of their life to do what they're told. And I guess that kind of starts at school ultimately. And I think back to the days I was in school and doing lessons and things. And I'm not particularly fantastic at remembering things really. So I didn't do particularly well at school because I couldn't remember to verbatimly reproduce the words. So when you're taught something, if you let intellectually think about it, you come up with your own version of what you've been taught. But the way that we do tests in school, you have to pass a test, and a test is based upon you regurgitating what you've been told. So I used to sit in history, and I used to ask my history teacher, we talk about all these wars and all these things that happened over the years, 1966, this happened and da da da. But nobody knows that because no one was alive. So how can we quantify that's real? Because we can't, it's not real potentially. There's no one walking the planet that can say that actually happened. But we verbatim say, the Romans did this and so and so did that, and we go back through all these years and religion kind of does the same thing. But there's no one that's walking the planet that's been around for thousands of years that can actually say those things really happened. But again, we're taught history and then we repeat the history that we were told, even though we don't know if it's true or not, because none of us were around. And I had quite a big problem at school with those sorts of teachings because they didn't sit right with me because I thought we're just literally kind of being programmed. And from my personality doesn't do that well with that type of programming, really.
Well, thinking for yourself and feeling for yourself will get you in big trouble. You should have learned that way back then. Well, I think that getting you to leave home, and that's why the ancient practice of satanic ritual abuse leaves the field wide open, and fear. Perhaps the this not perhaps I know the square root of the whole deal in this plane of polarities is love or fear.
Yeah, and that's what
That's
we see, isn't it? When we watch the media, we never see positive things. We never see
no,
people doing things that make you feel, your heart
no,
opens and you think that's a lovely thing to do. All we
no.
ever hear about is people that have died and been killed and wars and plane crashes. Every single piece of news we assimilate into ourselves is generally negative. And of course, over the time, that creates more and more fear and worry about our finances, worry about paying the bills, worry about our jobs. Then we're worried about wars and I grew up in the 80s and it was, we were talking about nuclear war every day. There was always going to be a nuclear war and we were all going to be wiped out. And I remember my parents, having these massive conversations about nuclear war and Holocaust and all sorts of stuff. And you think, but it's not happened. And if it did happen, it wouldn't matter because you wouldn't be here anyway. So why are we worrying about it? Because we don't need to worry about it, do we? But again,
No.
it's this whole, this whole continual bombardment in any which way you assimilate information. It's fear-based to keep the
Fear.
vibration down.
Yes, fear and demoralization. And the advanced civilizations, a handful of them in our past that we could learn from, that's swept under the rug. But they always bring front and center all of these tyrannical, warring, right, past civilizations. Well, I was just going to say the other aspect of your work that I've dipped my toes into, I have been part of a few exorcisms now. And the other thing that we can all do that I've seen just amazing results with is protecting myself with an energetic dome of light. I mean, I have a half a dozen amazing experiences with that. When I was an activist in California and I would go and take my public comment, and they would look like they had Tourette syndrome. I affected one of the guy's bladder. He always had to get up to pee. But once or twice I tried just putting a dome of light and love over the whole room, and it was absolutely amazing. And also a couple of potentially dangerous, scrappy situations that I've been in. I had to kind of take control of the situation. You sit down. Um, it was, it was really amazing. So I have a lot to learn, but it's very interesting stuff. And the political part of it, which I know isn't your space and you stay away from, but in my opinion, we've largely already won in that space. And for that reason, and also because of the direction that humanity is moving in, I think that your efforts and the direction that I'm going in is of the highest service and the most appropriate, you know, at this time. And anyway, what do you think that we could maybe get Chen to join the conversation? I know
Yeah,
he's shy. He's starting to come out of his shell. I know he's shy, but
yeah, he doesn't like to talk much. Yeah, Chad never misses an opportunity generally.
what do you think?
Because obviously, the way that I used to work, I would not really trance channel him. He would talk to me, and I would then verbalize what he said. But effectively, you kind of do end up with that Chinese whispers things, that the things that you're hearing might not be the way you would deliver the conversation. So you slightly, as a medium, you change the conversation to be, the one that you want to have, obviously.
Whoop, you froze up there momentarily.
And I think,
Okay.
oh, sorry. Yeah, you're back again.
Okay.
I think, yeah. So I think having a guy that can come in and talk direct, you take away the medium effectively, and you're conversing with another spirit, kind of ticks two boxes really from my perspective. One is kind of proves that there are spiritual entities that are, different because you see a different personality and you speak to a different personality. And of
Mm.
course, on the other side of it, you're actually talking to, quite a learned being that isn't physically here at this point in time and has a very different view on things. So quite often, when we talk to spirits that don't have a human body, they don't have emotions because obviously we have emotions because we're physical. So quite often they don't kind of get some of the things that are going on because they don't understand or they've forgotten that we are a very emotional species and we kind of run and we make decisions by emotions quite often, which generally isn't particularly good.
Which is beautiful, but it's also leaves us vulnerable to lower frequency beings that take advantage of same, huh?
Yeah, I think it's our Achilles heel as a species, as a kind of humanoid species, really, sort of Homo sapien. I think our emotions are one of the really good things about the human race, but also it's the Achilles heel that is there too, really, because
Yes.
obviously we can be manipulated by our kind of emotional feelings and people manipulate everybody every day with emotional words and emotional conversations. And of course the media being, the main thing that does that really.
Yes.
Cool. So let's get Chen in and you can have a chat with him. And I will
Okay.
connect. I will see you when I come back, so to speak.
Great.
Cool. Okay. So I'll just take a quick deep breath, 2 seconds, and then I'll hand you over. Just take my watch off. The watch is always a problem. Cool. Okay. Good day to you, young man.
Good day to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, I'm delighted, very excited to have this conversation. And of course, this is the second time that you and I have had a conversive narrative conversation, which is very good.
Yes. Well, the kind of the subject of my efforts as of late has been a little bit about. It's been called other people, and at this time, you know, it seems like it takes more effort than ever to maintain the sovereignty of self and keep our frequency in a little bit higher place. And I was hoping you could speak to that divine balance between expanding and being of service to others, but also having boundaries and maintaining the sovereignty of our own spirit. I was hoping you could speak to that. I think it would be might be of a lot of service at this time. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a very appropriate conversation because, of course, everything starts with self, really. So, one of the things that I like to promote really is service to self. And Andrew used to laugh because I used to say service to self first. And he used to say, no, it's service to others first. And I used to say, no, if you don't maintain your own boundaries, your own protection, your own vibration, then you become useless to other people because you can be manipulated by negative things effectively. So if you're maintaining your own integrity and you're speaking your truth, you're holding your vibration, all of those things amalgamate into a very protective individual. And that individual is very difficult to manipulate and be swayed. So maintaining your own etheric field and making sure that you speak your truth, because of course all of you have different truths. Your truth will not be the same as young Andrew's truth because you have different experiences, you come from different backgrounds. So when we talk about truth, many people say, well, there is only one truth. But of course, there can't be because everyone has a different understanding of what is true. But the way that we encourage you to live really is you live with integrity in yourself and you speak your truth. So when someone asks you a question, you answer the question with your truth. So if you were to ask me, do you like my socks? And they might be bright pink with flowers on. And I may think, well, bright pink doesn't really suit you, I don't think. But if you like to wear bright pink, then that's right for you. So that would be me speaking my truth. Rather than just saying, yes, young man, your socks are lovely, even though I don't think they.
Whoops. We froze up for just a
But
moment.
speaking our truth,
Yes.
speaking
Well,
our truth, oh, sorry.
oh no, please, Chen, go ahead.
I was just saying, speaking our truth changes our vibration. And that's the key thing. If you speak your truth, your vibration ascends and rises quite dramatically. But of course, this is why most people are manipulated emotionally and consciously not to speak their truth because that pushes that vibration down.
Yes. And it seems like a lot of humanity's challenge is, the boundary thing is very much tied into loving ourselves. And I think the dark ones have convinced us, many, that, loving ourselves is somehow this conceited, vain kind of frequency when it's really not coming from that at all, huh?
Yes, of course, it's quite a clever manipulative move by the dark aspect, effectively. And of course, this is what happened with Hollywood years and years ago. If you go back to the 60s or the 50s, when television was invented, television has been used as the method to manipulate your species, humanity, really, because of course, if you continually see imagery of beautiful people, people that look nicer than you, that wear better clothes than you, that have more money than you do, that seem to be successful, that implants a thought process in your mind that's quite contagious. And of course, you become quite negative in your own self. So you know that you don't look as pretty or as nice or have those things. And of course, this slowly erodes your own self-confidence. And then, of course, especially for the female population, they continually seeing image in the media of cosmetic brands and products that beautify the external person. And of course, they will never achieve the looks of those people, which is why the advertising companies always use, very, very seductive sexual imagery around the products they sell, because one, it sells the products, and two, the people purchasing and adopting the cells will never achieve the same look. So it's a guaranteed continual sell. But what it does, of course, it promotes dislike of the self, as you said. And people that don't like themselves and don't like the way they look, or their body size, or the energy they carry, of course, become quite negative in their self, and their vibration again drops. So this is done on purpose.
Yes, we've been. This doesn't feel like an organic unfolding of a society. I'm starting to think of. I've been played. Could you speak to this question, Chen? How would you say, with the academic knowledge that we're electrical beings of frequency and light, how would you say that the EMF affects our ability to, uh, uh, you know, stay in the sanctity of self and, you know, be who we really should be? How would you say that the EMF affects uh, our being, and how might we protect ourselves energetically, if at all, from these man-made frequencies?
Yes, it's a very topical question and a very conclusively intelligent question. So thank you for asking that. So if we think about the human being, so let's go back to the ape days, and of course Homo erectus that appeared. So effectively, you're not really apes. Obviously, you were designed and created, but effectively, back in those days, there were no EMFs. There would have been radiation from the sun coming from an intergalactic perspective into your solar system and entering your planet. So there's always been electromagnetic frequencies, and we all know that the frequency range that exists, we have infrared on one end, we have ultraviolet on the other, we have the visible light spectrum in the middle. So you as humans have eyes that obviously intake light, and that light connects to your optic nerve, and obviously it runs on your whole penal system. So you are designed to assimilate electromagnetic energy because you're electromagnetic species. And of course, we're very aware that the human being is mostly water, even though you don't really see that. But every cell has to have glucose and water in to work properly for you to be healthy and for you to grow and to achieve maturity. So, and of course, we know that water changes its properties when you apply different things. So we know that if you use a microwave oven and you put a glass of water in a microwave oven, you cannot see the microwave waves because you don't see them, but the water gets hot. And we know from a scientific perspective that the water gets hot because all of the molecules are colliding together to create heat. And that's what increases the topical heat of the water inside a microwave. So the same thing is happening to humans. You're now on a planet that always had radiation, always had light, both visible and non-visible spectrums, but
Oh, froze up for a moment.
able to achieve life and obviously to mature. Sorry, did we lose the connection?
Only for a couple of seconds, Chen. Forgive me.
Wow. Sorry, yes. These things do happen and we overcome technological problems, of course.
Yes.
So if we think about that, so the human being is designed to be a being and a body that can assimilate health with electromagnetic frequency. What's happening now, of course, is you're being bombarded with abnormal frequencies. So rather than just the visible light spectrum, we're looking at all of these frequencies that come from mobile phone towers and from other wireless stations and all sorts of other places too, of course. And if you live in an urban environment these days and everyone has a Wi-Fi router in their house, you're obviously sat inside and bathed in these very, very abnormal high frequency, microwave frequency um, situations. And of course, all of the cells in your body are creating heat. So you know that when you hold a mobile phone to your head and you have a prolonged conversation, you have a hot ear because of course waves are going through your ear, the same as you microwave water in a microwave. So the same thing's happening. So you're bombarding your molecular system and every cell of your being with these frequencies that create heat. And of course that creates cell damage, and cell damage means it will create problems. And this of course is why we have things like cancer and other things that seem to be exploding off of the scale. And of course, the other problem is it stops the thought process. So people end up with calcified pineal glands. They can't think properly. They start to exhibit symptoms of dementia, those sorts of things. So this adverse increase of this electromagnetic frequencies in your daily life is going to be very, very detrimental to the human being and, of course, to the human family effectively. So children that are being born in the fetus that are subjected to huge amounts of radiation are going to start to be born with abnormalities.
Yes. Well, and then there's the frequency that we create for ourselves. So if we have billions of cells that are all in effect little receptors, perhaps the question we should ask ourselves is, what do we want them to receive?
Yes,
Combined with the information that we're really is becoming mainstream, that our thoughts and intention do affect water and blood and tangible outcome, huh?
yes, and this is the whole thing. If we look at telepathy, for instance, when you think of something or you speak, if I'm speaking to young Andrew, who's a medium, he has telepathy engaged and turn on, and we can have a normal conversation because, of course, I am sending him information that he receives into his field, and his field then translates that into understandable words. And of course, that's a frequency of vibration. So there are many, many frequencies that are being used by all of you on a daily basis that you don't really understand. But of course, you're exactly right that this is going to have a huge change to your actual species. And if the electromagnetic radiation continues in the way that it currently is, people are being bombarded with more and more frequencies at higher um, power outputs, then of course society is going to start to notice this very detrimental effect.
Yes. Plus the Dark One's preoccupation with reducing everything to an antenna, including in our own body now. But that's another technocratic question. May I ask this? My, from what I am gathering, increasingly us humans are hybrids from all over the universe, and one and all. And could you speak to how perhaps some of our species, evidenced by our different blood types and our different body types and eye color, could you speak to maybe how, if at all, how some of us hybrids and species might, how would that interact with our ability to deal with our ascension spiritually? And is it synonymous with some of us being perhaps a little bit further down the road than others?
Yes, it's a great question. So if you look at the species on the planet, you're quite right that there is no link between an ape and Homo erectus, the human being. And of course, there's never been and there never will be any information to show that transition because, of course, it didn't happen. So human beings were basically a manipulated species that obviously are different types of animals joined together with different levels of different overlays of intelligence into those types of species. So, I mean, predominantly on the planet, you have Caucasian white people, you have the Asian race, and then, of course, you have the black race. And obviously, all of you have procreated and swapped, and there are lots of different types of colors and genres, but effectively, generally, there are three types of human that are walking the planet today, and each is quite different. So, each one has a very different level of prescribed intelligence. As you said, the blood types are different. The physical carrier, the physical body is different. If you look at a native black person compared to an Asian person, they're completely different. The bone structures are different. The muscular skeleton's different. They different species can tolerate different things. So if we look at lots of the native species in Australia and places like that, it's very well known that they're not able to drink alcohol because it's a toxic poison to their particular blood type and their particular configuration. So if you give one of these native Aboriginal species alcohol, they become completely wild and very difficult to manage. And but of course you could have a Caucasian person that's got a completely different configuration, blood type, muscular structure, and they could drink alcohol all day potentially without having the same effects on their psychology. So there's completely different people. And of course, when you start to blend these different species together effectively. And of course, you start to get mixes of the racial aspects in terms of what people look like, what color they are, how they can do things, and the intelligence level too. So what you're saying is exactly right. That the human species is a created species effectively, which of course is why it's of so much interest to so many different races and species that you don't see physically, because you are effectively in a laboratory type environment, and planet Earth is a complete container of itself.
Yes, that leads into my next question, or something I was hoping you could clarify. We seem to be, by benevolent beings, highly revered. What is the ramifications and the significance of this experiment here, which seems to be, talk about diversity, which seems to be how are we going to get on? And what is the cosmic ramifications of this? And why does it hold so much interest to benevolent light beings in other parts of our um, solar system?
Yeah, so it's a big question, I would say. Probably one that we could speak about for hours and hours because, of course, it's very topical and very interesting. But if you think about other species of entities have evolved over thousands and thousands of years in different planets, in different star systems and galaxies. So what we have is we have the human being that's been created by this polarization of different species. So you've been mixed together and you create this new type of person that we call the human. And that person has a soul, it has a spiritual energy that's conscious and can animate the physical body. So lots of these other races effectively are watching how you develop and how you change. Lots of these other species have big problems with their own procreation. Many of them can't procreate anymore at all because they've evolved to those sorts of points. So they're actually using the humans almost as we said, as a laboratory to see if we can blend or if they can blend their genetics with human genetics to create cross breed species and obviously maintain their own lineage of their own species. And there are many species of entity that are here doing the same sorts of things. Of course, some of them, obviously, we would know the names of, etc. But that's the general concept. But when we talk about the human being, you are very unique because, of course, the human being is still very new. But many other species have basically time warped time, so they've come back from the future to create part of a species that is partly theirs to see if they can then blend your genetics with themselves in this future timeline. So there's a lot of timeline changing going on behind the scenes that these different races are using to their advantage.
Interesting. Could you, I know it's a big subject, could you speak briefly to a few of the examples as to why many of these other species, their numbers have been decreased? Has it been a war? Has it been cloning subsequent to the war, which has diluted them genetically? Is it a dark brand of AI? Uh, why is our genealogy? Could you speak to that? And why is our genealogy, aside from the fact that we're beautiful beings of love and compassion, why is our genealogy so seemingly so coveted, Chen?
Yeah, so you're a very learned being, my friend. It's very interesting observation. So all of the things that you discussed are true. There have been wars and there are continual wars. The light and the dark do not integrate, and they do not integrate on this planet, and they do not integrate on other planets and other star systems. So there is always these wars that happen between species. And of course, so that's one aspect. Obviously, the cloning concept, as species start to develop, generally, if you look at your species, people have a timeline for their life. Maybe 0 to 80 years would be an average or a good timeline. So there are always people inside your reproductive species that want to live forever. And of course, in your world, those that have the most money wish to continue their life. So they spend lots of money on research to look at how they can maintain their health, how they can maintain their cellular reproductive systems to continue to live. And if they actually accept the fact that they will physically die at some point, because the physical vehicle of the body basically outlives itself, then can they take their conscious spiritual awareness and put that into another body and continue? So the concepts of recreation or reincarnation obviously come into the fray to a certain degree. So cloning is obviously that conversation. If you can clone a personality, if we could take your living conscious awareness out of the body that you call James today and put that into someone else, then your conscious awareness will continue all of the life lessons and things that you've learned through your life as James would continue. So you can see the appetite to do that would be quite big. And many of these species have toyed with that type of thing long, long time ago. And of course, what generally happens is they end up making or causing problems for their own species. And then, of course, they get to a point that they can't procreate properly and they lose the ability to be able to continue their own lineage and their own species. And the only way out of that trap is to find another species that you can blend with to continue that type of conscious awareness. So
Hmm.
cloning is obviously that conversation effectively. So we have wars, we have cloning, and then of course we also have, as you said, AI type races. There are races. So we talk about the Greys, for instance. The Greys generally are seen to be a kind of AI type race that don't really have a conscious awareness. So they effectively are automatons that have been programmed almost like robots. And of course, your species is doing this today. You're now building robotics, and your scientific understanding of the world has got to a point that you can create robotics blended with computer programs and science to animate robotic entities. But it won't be long before you start to blend that into skin and start to grow people that have robotics inside them. And of course, this is what your sci-fi programs all show you, is that you get to a point that you have people walking down the road and you don't know whether they're what you would call a purebred true human, or whether they're some type of AI cloned individual, which could be robotic, or it could be some other type of biological substrate that's animating that physical body.
Hmm. So, in my glib attempt to try to understand, could you say that maybe the benevolent beings that are in our midst have our ability to create and manifest in and of their own intentions? And they are perhaps very much our cheerleaders. And are there the other ones that simply are parasitic? Theirs is to supplant, subvert, and suck the energy from and act parasitic with our energy and our souls. And are these two, could you loosely put them both in two categories and say that Andy's work is with the latter and our cheerleaders are in the former?
Yes, that's exactly the conversation, really. There are a group of entities, myself included, that have a very high vibration, are here on planet Earth working with humans like yourselves in a positive way. And we're helping to clear the planet of these low vibrations and try to equalize the playing field. Because what's happening is, of course, there is an overarching group of beings, if you like, from different races that watch what happens on planet Earth because it manifests in different places. And it's supposed to be a level playing field. But of course, dark entities never play fair. So of course they subvert, as you said, and confuse, and they are parasitic because they drain people's energy. So they are continually trying to change the game in their favor. And entities like myself and many others are obviously here to work with people such as Andrew and yourself to bring that vibration and level the playing field. But of course, ultimately, we have to respect free will. There are universal laws that have been applied to this planet Earth, and we have to work within the constraints of those, even though the dark side generally doesn't. And that, of course, makes it quite difficult from our perspective to maintain a fair game, really, when the opposition and the opponents don't really play by the rules very often. And of course, they use every loophole they can to maintain control in the ways that they do.
Hmm. It's almost as though the harvesting of our negative energy, the loosh, as it's been called, it can be almost transformed into like almost a tangible kind of thing for them, huh?
Yeah, so energy is traded. There is as you buy, as you said at the start, young man, you can assimilate milk, or you as human species take milk from a cow, which is the product from the cow, and then you process it, and you basically trade it. You sell it in supermarkets. People drink it as milk, or you may consume it as cheese or other products. So the cow's milk is a commodity that is very in high demand by your species. So these other entities exist in this low vibratory state. So people in a very high state of fear create lots of adrenaline in their blood. That adrenaline has a vibratory frequency that they can assimilate, and they can trade that frequency. And this, of course, comes back to your earlier conversation about satanic abuse. That's why it's so prevalent on this planet, because if you can put a human in a huge state of fear, that level of negative energy and emotional state is basically assimilated into the blood, and that can be drained as a frequency that can then be packaged and sold intergalactically. And human negative energy has a huge price. Think about the days of elephants that had tusks and ivory. Ivory was seen to be used as a product by the rich people, even though the process of achieving and removing tusks from elephants and such like is very, very negative and very disruptive to the animals, because of course they're generally killed. The price on it was very high. So everything that's difficult to collect has a high price. So fear as a vibration has an exceedingly high price, and there are many entities that live off of fear. So of course they are effectively looking to assimilate that vibration into themselves, and that's how they live. That's how they continue to live. And you said earlier that the Draco race, for instance, not all are bad, of course. There are positive Dracos too, but the Draco race especially have been working to basically harmonize and collect those frequencies in the different ways that they do. And that's what we see on this planet.
Hmm. Beautifully said. Well, in the interest of your time and my venturing even further outside my lane, I'm going to finish with a couple of kind of heavy questions. How do you and your team refer to God, and can you define God for us?
Yeah, so the God question is quite difficult in a way because, of course, again, the programming system that's overlaid into most of your conscious awareness is that God, if you ask children what God is, they will tell you it's a generally it's a male that sits up on top of the clouds that has a big stick and is looking down, is watching everything that you do, and if you do negative or bad things, then you become punished. Of course, God, from our perspective, is a vibration, so we call it source energy. So everything has to be created, basically. Well, we know that energy isn't really created, it can be changed in format, changed in frequency. So the way that I would describe God is it's a benign energy, neither positive nor negative, but it's a frequency effectively, and we call it source.
Hmm. Does God have an ego?
Well, again, the God energy isn't really polarized in a positive or negative way, but of course humans polarize themselves with their own understanding. And again, different groups and organizations use God as a manipulating conversation. And that I think is where things have become confused on planet Earth, really, is that over the years, many religions use the big stick as the God word to control the populace.
That was a rather shallow question, but what has been written and kind of resonated with me a little bit, it's almost as though this all-encompassing energy that was beyond my words is almost playing a kind of game with all these manipulations and all of the contradictions and sabotage going on. It's almost as though there's a game going on, and that is, in this lifetime, will you find your way home?
Yes, well,
Despite it
that is
all, will you find your way home?
That is the question. So God is within each of you because, of course, you are comprised of energy. And as you said at the start, young man, you're comprised of light. So when we look at a person, if I look at you from a non-physical perspective without eyes, if I look at you from the vibrational frequency I exist in, I judge you by your frequency of vibration, how high you vibrate, and by your light. You broadcast light in interdimensional space. So every single human walking the planet has a frequency that's them, and they're also broadcasting light. Now, the more powerful you become, the more you understand the spiritual techniques of meditation and self-cleansing and those sorts of things. You take the layers off of the onion that is your conscious awareness and vibration, and then you broadcast more and more light. So that God energy effectively is your light that's inside you.
Hmm, beautiful. Well, since I'm the only one before you, and for my own curiosity and for the in the interest of learning, does my aura look like, and what color is it, and what does the colors, and I understand it can change. What does the color of my aura represent?
Yes, it's a good question. So when we talk about the colours of aura, of course, if I open my eyes, my physical eyes, and I was looking at you or sat in the room with you, I would be able to see the auric field. So if someone sits by a white wall and you reduce the lighting slightly, generally you can see that interdimensional frequency and you can see people's auric field. And of course, there are cameras that can take pictures of the aura, which changes continually. So when
Oops, we froze up for just a moment.
you're in a place of non-fear, you would have a very purple-based aura, which is a high frequency color. And then, of course, as you move down in terms of your emotional state, if you were very angry and negative in a very sad place and unnourished, your body and physical being was unnourished, your colors would drop down to very dark hues of red. So almost the auric field is almost a pattern based upon the chakra colors, if you like. So the higher you vibrate, you start to move up towards those golds and those white colors that we talk about that basically normally are associated with crown chakra. If your
Hmm,
vibration is low and negative, then we'd expect to see very dark reds. So the way
hmm,
that I see your aura, you're in that mid range, up above orange, light orange, green in certain places. It's a positive aura, not a negative one. And of
hmm.
course, you would never achieve white light because, again, white light is a completely different frequency of vibration. And for a human being in the old days, religion used to talk about people ascending and they would see them broadcast light or they would turn into light effectively. But of course, this is more of a mythical conversation. But as your vibration increases, then of course you start to move up and down amongst that frequency range.
So our experience and as our circumstance unfolds, it's a function of our Akashic record, it's a function of our belief set, it's a function of our past lives. Uh, is it also kind of a divine co-creation with Source to present lessons that will offer opportunity to happening for us instead of to us? Is it kind of a combination of the above, or?
Yes, it's an accumulation of all of those things. And I think you framed that particular question quite well, young man. So effectively, with the human being, everything in life is never just one thing. It's always an onion that has multiple layers, and you can have an onion that has lots of layers off on one side, but the layers are still intact on the other. And of course, that doesn't achieve balance. So trying to move yourself into a higher vibration and trying to move into an ascended state means working through your shadow side, reducing achieving a point whereby you can understand the experiences that you've had in this life, of course, and in past lives too. Um, Forgiving people that have done negative and nasty things to you, trying to find a point whereby your mental state is completely controlled in a positive way through sovereignty, which was the start of this conversation. And if you're going to find yourself in a sovereign state, you find that nothing really can penetrate you. And then, of course, the programming starts to disappear. So when you hear people talking about particular things, if those things don't resonate with your understanding, because the vibration is different, so you just let them go. So people can call you names and say nasty things to you, and if you've worked upon yourself, those those words have no meaning because your vibration is high. If I say something to you today and you become very angry, then I've obviously triggered you in some way. And that trigger is embedded in your field. Something happened to you at some point in this life or previous life, and that associated emotional energy is the trigger that I've just pulled. And then, of course, you become angry, or you may defend yourself, or you may get into some type of disagreement. But in theory, people that are ascending into a very high vibration don't really have triggers because they've worked and cleared most of that negativity, that stagnant energy, and they've been through forgiveness and they start to become very humble people. And this is what you see if you look at Buddhist monks and people like that. You will struggle to argue with a Buddhist monk because they spend hours a day meditating, they're clearing their field, they're clearing lots of their past life resonance, they're unpeeling that onion so that the onion core that's left is very small. And that's what they don't really associate with normal people, particularly because they have nothing in common with most people, because they're not interested in material possessions, material things. They're basically working on their spiritual ascension and effectively their vibration and their broadcast of light.
Hmm. Well, to put a cherry on top of this treat that you've given us today, could you maybe give us some information about where humanity is heading and ascension, our ascension, if you will, and perhaps some wisdom as to how we might most effectively navigate this chapter in our ongoing as to represent our highest good at this feels like very significant time that we're in.
Question, so thank you for asking. So the way that we see humanity, sorry, did I miss what you said there, young man?
No, go right
Oh,
ahead,
I
Chen.
think, sorry, I think the communication stopped for a second or
Oh,
two. But okay, I've picked back up now. So the way that we see things from humanity's perspective is this is a crossroads. You've actually reached a crossroads now, and depending upon the collective will depend upon which path that your species walks. So you have a group of people that are becoming spiritual, understanding spiritual things. Those in your audience and ourselves that are conversing today and talking would be one fork in the road. And then we have what we would call the general collective that effectively are asleep from a spiritual perspective. They have a very low vibration, and of course, effectively, they're warded and guarded by this negative vibrational frequency. So they're blinded by the light to a certain degree. So those people are likely to go down a completely different path. And depending upon the numbers, we'll see humanity split more than likely. Some will go back to spiritual techniques, spiritual ways of living, connecting to guides, connecting to spirit, working with integrity and truth. And the other group of humanity will be led down a techno path that will be a control system that they won't be able to come back from. And that's why there's so much time and effort now. And you said at the start, young man, that this seemed to be a crossroads for humanity. The dark side was concerned and worried, I think you said, and they seem to be feverishly trying to control. That's the reason, because that crossroads has been met. And there are spiritual entities that I work with and myself that are here to try to keep and enlighten people and bring people to a positive place for your species, really. And of course, I'm also working for the planet because every time we clear one of our clients, we clear negative vibrations, entities, attachments, and things from their field, their vibration comes up. And then everywhere they walk with a higher vibration. So there are many other guides like myself in different places, working through different people in different ways. But all of our job is the same, is to bring this planet's vibration up to a point that the negative aspect cannot sustain itself. And that's when potentially humanity can move into a new dawn, a new era. And this is where we hear your media talking about this great reset. So the great reset is the control system, basically, that
yeah.
the majority of people are likely to go down if they're not brought across to a new understanding of what's happening. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. The last question I'll have for today, and I thank you very much, is so it has been highly prophesized, and we are beginning to see that there's going to be a kind of spiritual sorting coming along. Will this be as a result of a cosmic flash? Or will this be will the sorting be have to do with those that have received the jab, or both? What will be the catalyst for this sorting, and will it happen somewhat suddenly, or will it be very gradual?
This is another very interesting question with different replies, I would imagine, from different viewpoints effectively. So we don't see a particular catalysmic event happening per se, even though poles are shifting, the planet's always evolving and shifting. And of course, um, everything is cyclic. As we know, everything is always cyclic. So we have ice ages, and then of course things warm up. So the climate is changing on its own. But of course, there's lots of climate control happening at the moment to try to force things in a certain direction that obviously works for the negative side. And the negative side, of course, isn't just using one mechanism. So you talk about um, the word that no one is allowed to talk about, I think, in terms of things that are put into the human body. And I think I've said to young Andrew many times, the only things that should go into the human body are through the mouth, because of course the human is designed to process things from the mouth. So if you eat something, then you have a whole system that's designed to extract nutrition. You have kidneys to detoxify and purify, etc. So everything should be going in the mouth. So anything that doesn't go in the mouth, that goes directly in the bloodstream, is obviously circumnavigating the whole filtering system of a human being. And therefore, it's not particularly good from an energetic perspective, and probably not very good from a physical perspective either. But of course, that is one mechanism to change people's frequency. And then if you look at the food, most of the food is toxified these days with chemicals. Not many people now on the planet are eating what we would call pure, homegrown, normal food. Everything is adulterated one way or another. And then, of course, the skies are being sprayed with toxic molecular chemicals that everyone's assimilating in through their noses when they breathe. So there's an onslaught in many different ways on your species, and of course this is what we're starting to see is obviously the high levels of people leaving the planet in different ways.
Is our medical system going to be transformed for the better in the near future?
Well, it's a good question, but if you think about the current medical systems for most countries, they're tied to finance. So they're designed to make money. And of course, anything that's designed and tied to finance is never going to work for the individual. It's always going to work for the organizations that sell their products. So we don't see that becoming particularly positive. But what we do see is a resurgence of old information. And again, there are many entities here that are working through and channeling through people to bring back the old knowledge of using the plants and the fauna on the planet to work in the way they were designed to work. So if we look at nature and we look at medications, most medications that are pharmaceutically derived are derived from natural products in the first place, but they're chemically synthesized to be able to sell. So going back to the old ways using proper plants, because every plant has a vibrational frequency. And when you intake that into the human carrier, it changes the vibration. And of course, this is what homeopathy and some of those things are about, taking tiny tablets that change your frequency or clear your frequencies. So again, there's going to be a big resurgence of people looking to treat themselves from a collective perspective without turning to chemically derived substitutes to do things. Because of course we all know that as soon as a company or organization is providing with you with some type of tablet or chemical, it's going to change everything about you. And that we know, of course, is of side effects. So people that take lots of medications know that every time they change their chemistry, there's a side effect to changing that chemistry. And generally, the side effect isn't particularly good. But if you go back to natural products, go back to nature, in the same way that the Chinese system does, if you look at Chinese medicine, it was always about using bark, natural fauna, plants, and other products that are naturally put on the planet to work with and be assimilated by humans in a good way. whereas chemicals, of course, are not designed to do that. So
Yes.
no, the answer to your question is we don't really see the medical system being particularly supportive to health.
Yes. That might be an understatement. Well, this has been very enriching again, and I thank you so much, Chen. I could talk to you all day. Mine would only be to have the capacity to take it all in. Thank you, thank you. And I hope you can share with us again on my little platform, and very
Yes.
grateful and
Well,
appreciative.
yes, I would like to say thank you, young man, for giving us the opportunity because, of course, we are here to try to educate and to teach. And even if only one person listens to this conversation and is inspired and motivated to make some changes in their life in a positive way, then it's a success. So we thank you for providing the platform for people to be able to find this type of information because, of course, it is a choice. People choose what they listen to, they choose the information that is assimilated into their field. And people like yourself may start small, but of course, acorns grow huge, big oak trees, as we know. So thank you for doing the work that you do because everyone is contributing in their way, and that's what we need. There is no collective, there will be no entity that turns up that's going to fix all of the problems on this planet. The species known as Homo erectus, humans need to do it themselves. You can work with other entities such as myself, but your collective consciousness is what has to make the change.
Yes. Perfect way to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Chen. Many thanks and gratitude. And maybe you could hand the phone back over to Andy.
Yes, I will say good day to you. Thank you for the opportunity, and we will speak soon, no doubt. Good
Mm,
day.
many thanks. It was about 3.5 hours. Is that okay?
It's not dark in here yet, so I think you've done quite well.
A pleasure. A pleasure as always. And
Yeah, so hopefully Chen stayed on track, did he?
it couldn't have been
I
couldn't have
dare,
been couldn't have been better.
I dare to think.
A lot for my little brain to take in. Thank you,
Yeah,
thank you. You've very much enriched me, and the only thing I can do is to send you a few clients and try to pay forward the information that you've imparted on me, and work on my own spiritual development. That's about all I can think of to do, other than to say thank you.
no, perfect, James. It's great. Well, it's great to meet you. It's great to have you on the course. Obviously, that's kind of what we do, really. Is we're trying to, again, every time we teach someone some techniques and things, it's just our version, and then you can teach those to other people, and together we all kind of connect, and everyone's playing their part, aren't they? Really. So I just kind of have this kind of path in front of me, really, that I just walk my bit, and then of course the right people turn up at the right times, and we just expect to kind of forge change, really, which is good. And thanks for doing the podcast because, of course, without you doing this podcast, nobody gets to hear the information, which is the whole point, really.
Yes. Well, I've been reviewing our course and watching your YouTubes, and thank you. And thank Jane as well. And I'll continue the work, and many thanks and gratitude uh,
Perfect.
to you.
Okay, you take care, James, and we'll catch you again soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Cheers,
Bye.
mate. Bye bye.
And thank you very much for watching What Woke You Up. And I hope you'll come back and see us again. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Send me a comment, an email, or if you feel like you or somebody that you know might be fitting for my little effort, please forward that to me. And many thanks. Enjoy the show, guys. That's why we're here. Thank you. Bye.